Hello everyone, I am Fei Wang, an analyst at TrendForce. As we approach the end of 2025 and look ahead to 2026, we have to confront a clear reality. The solar PV industry is undergoing a profound transition. The continual growth logic that dominated the past decade has come to an end, and the solar industry is entering a phase of post-boom rational reassessment. Today, I will share TrendForce's latest outlook for the global PV industry in 2026, focusing on four key dimensions: global demand trends, supply-side changes, technology iteration pathways, and the reconstruction of profitability models. Let us begin with solar installation demand. Under a neutral scenario, we estimate that global new PV installations will reach approximately 592 gigawatts in 2026, representing a year-on-year decline of about 4.4%. This would mark the first annual contraction in global PV installations in the past decade. However, this does not indicate a broad-based collapse in global demand. Instead, the market will exhibit pronounced regional divergence. Installations in the Asia-Pacific region are expected to decline significantly, while Europe, the Americas, and the Middle East and Africa, MEA, continue to expand steadily. From a regional perspective, in 2026, the Asia-Pacific market will see a sharp decline, primarily due to reduced installations in China. Europe will maintain stable growth, while the Americas are expected to see a modest rebound. In addition, the Middle East and Africa will continue to deliver strong growth momentum. Focusing on the Asia-Pacific region, we project new PV installations of around 360 gigawatts in 2026, down approximately 10% year-on-year. The downturn in Asia-Pacific is largely driven by adjustments in the Chinese market. China accounts for around 65% of total Asia-Pacific installations, and its slowdown has a direct and significant impact on the region's overall performance. That said, markets excluding China, such as Malaysia, Vietnam, and India, are expected to maintain robust growth momentum. Turning specifically to China, we expect new PV installations in 2026 to decline to around 233 gigawatts, representing a year-on-year decrease of approximately 14%. After the supercycle peak from 2023 to 2025, China's PV market is expected to enter a more rational plateau phase. Key constraints include three main factors. Firstly, grid consumption and energy storage bottlenecks have become hard constraints. Secondly, distributed PV faces challenges such as saturation of rooftop resources and limited grid capacity. Lastly, 2026 marks the first year of China's 15th five-year plan, which historically tends to be a period of relatively moderate and cautious policy adjustments. In Europe, new PV installations are expected to reach approximately 98.4 gigawatts in 2026, maintaining a stable growth trajectory. While utility-scale projects are increasingly affected by negative power prices, the implementation of the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM-BA, is driving a sharp rise in corporate decarbonization demand. As a result, commercial and industrial (C&I) solar is set to become the primary source of incremental growth in the European market. Let's look at the Americas. The United States remains the dominant force, accounting for around 69% of regional installations. Supported by the investment tax credit ITC window and surging electricity demand from AI data centers, the US market is expected to remain at a high level. So, we can see Central America is worth close attention, because its absolute market size remains small, but the growth momentum is particularly strong and increasingly visible. Finally, we turn to the MEA region, which is the fastest-growing market globally now. New PV installations are expected to reach approximately 46.9 gigawatts in 2026, representing a year-on-year increase of about 19%. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates not only have ambitious national visions such as Vision 2030, but also substantial, well-funded, tendered utility-scale PV projects moving rapidly toward implementation. The region is emerging as the blue ocean market in the global solar PV industry. After reviewing demand, let us turn to the supply side. The core characteristics of the supply landscape in 2026 can be summarized in a few words: oversupply at the low end, shortage at the high end. Under the combined influence of China's anti-rat race policies and market-driven self-correction, irrational capacity expansion is being curbed. However, structural imbalances remain pronounced. To put it simply, commoditized and low-end products are trapped in an increasingly saturated market, while high-end capacity featuring high efficiency, patent protection, and regulatory compliance is set to face a tightening supply. This high-end segment will be the key source of excess profitability for leading companies going forward. In response to escalating trade barriers, Chinese PV manufacturers are undergoing a fundamental shift in their global strategy, from made in China, sold globally, to manufactured globally, sold globally. Future leaders in this industry should possess globally distributed manufacturing footprints and localized supply chain ecosystems in overseas markets. On the technology front, N-type cell technologies are expected to account for 98.5% of the market in 2026, fully displacing P-type products. Among them, TOPCon, while increasingly in a defensive position, will remain the absolute mainstream technology, with an estimated 83% market share. Meanwhile, XBC technologies, leveraging both aesthetic appeal and efficiency advantages, will continue to penetrate the high-end distributed generation segment, with market share expected to reach around 12%. Further penetration, however, will largely depend on improvements in the performance of bifacial products. For mainstream TOPCon technology, 2026 will mark the beginning of the TOPCon 3 technology advancement phase. With LiCo, laser-enhanced contact optimization, as the core enabling technology, combined with rear-side poly-Si optimization and half-cell passivation techniques, cell conversion efficiency is expected to surpass 27%. This technological competition ultimately manifests at the module level as a contest of power output. Next-generation products from leading manufacturers such as Jinko Solar, Tongwei, and Trina Solar are scheduled for delivery by the end of 2025, with module power ratings generally reaching 650 W to 670 W. Please remember the benchmark of higher than 650 W, 650 W plus. This will be the clear dividing line between first-tier and second-tier manufacturers in 2026. Companies unable to achieve this power threshold will effectively lose eligibility to compete for high-quality projects. Against this backdrop, the key question for companies is, where will profits come from? The era of competing purely on scale has come to an end. By 2026, the focus of getting higher profits will shift toward technology-driven barriers, technology, monopolization, and overseas expansion dividends. Finally, I would like to highlight the largest grey rhino risk in the PV supply chain: a shortage of silver. From 2023 to 2027, the global silver market is expected to face an average annual supply-demand deficit exceeding 3,000 metric tons. For PV manufacturers, this represents a short-term profit killer, but a long-term technology catalyst. It will force the industry to accelerate the adoption of silver reduction and silver-free technologies, such as zero BB, zero busbar architectures, and copper electroplating. Ultimately, those who can first break their dependence on silver will gain decisive control over cost competitiveness. To conclude, looking ahead to 2026, we highlight 5 key trends to watch. First one, global installation demand moderates. Global PV installations record their first year of negative growth, while China enters a plateau phase. Second one, regional divergence in installations. Growth engines shift from Asia-Pacific toward the Middle East and Africa and the Americas. The third one is supply-side restructuring. The supply landscape evolves toward oversupply at the low end and tightness at the high end. Obsolete capacity may exit at an accelerated pace, while leading players widen the gap with second- and third-tier manufacturers through 650W plus high-power modules. The fourth one is about profitability recovery. Profits increasingly concentrate around technology, premiums, and overseas expansion dividends. Lastly, key downside risk. Silver shortages represent the largest grey rhino risk in the supply chain. With PV demand remaining structurally high and mining supply inflexible, the supply-demand gap is expected to persist over the next 3 years. And that's all about TrendForce's analysis of the global PV supply-demand landscape for 2026. Thank you so much for your attention.